The sporting year of 1974, 50 years ago, was full of intrigue, drama, and peculiarity. It ranged from the Rumble in the Jungle, what some have called the greatest sporting event of the 20th century, to the slightly surprising rise of Polish football. Here are some sporting and other stories from 1974. A very curious year. Welcome to the Luke Alfred Show. I've 30 years of experience on the front lines of sports journalism, covering some of the biggest games in cricket, rugby, the FIFA World Cup, and even the Olympic Games. Come and join me as we learn about some of the greatest sports stories you've never heard. I'm Luke Alfred, and welcome to the show. Before we kick off with this week's sports story, I'd like to tell you about an open role with the Luke Alfred Show. We are looking for a digital marketer to join our team. We aim to introduce our superb product to a larger audience. Please see the details in the show notes. In June 1973, the England football side took a rare peek behind the Iron Curtain. On the face of it, their assignment looked straightforward: to play against Poland in a qualifier for the following year's World Cup. They boarded a plane, brushing aside the inconvenient fact that Poland had won the gold medal in football at the 1972 Munich Olympics in West Germany, beating East Germany and the Soviet Union on the way to the final. In the final, they beat Hungary to win the gold medal. After winning the 1966 World Cup, England believed that they were blessed with a kind of manifest destiny. They were coached by World Cup winning coach Sir Alf Ramsey. They had one of the world's most recognizable players in Bobby Moore in their ranks, and an up-and-coming, where did you last hear those three quaint words, goalkeeper in Peter Shilton, Gordon Banks' successor. They would prevail despite being deep in the heart of the communist world. They were England, after all. England didn't prevail in Poland. Playing in the unusual colors of yellow shirts and blue shorts, they conceded the opening goal against the home side wearing white shirts with red shorts. And it got worse. In the second half, Moore received a back pass from England teammate Roy McFarland. Normally, Moore would have dealt with the pass with his customary aplomb, but upon receiving the ball this time round, Moore experienced an atypical and very un-Moore-like moment. Moore had always commanded a football, but now the football seemed to command him. It got stuck between his legs, and for a horrible instant, Moore looked clumsy. He was dispossessed by the Polish striker Włodzimierz Lubański, who sprinted downfield and scored Poland's second goal. There was elation on the stands. England didn't visit Poland every day, and now, here they were, the 1966 World Cup winners, 2-0 down. When the final whistle was blown half an hour later, the score remained 2-0 to the Poles. For England fans, it beggared belief. It was a "did this really happen to us" moment. After the trip to Poland, Moore only played 3 more times for England. All of the matches were friendlies, so the game against Poland in the southern Polish town of Chorzów was his last competitive football for his country. By the time came for Poland to visit England for the return leg, Moore had retired from the international game. Players like Emlyn Hughes, Liverpool's so-called Crazy Horse, and Leeds United's Norman Hunter were preferred instead. Lubański, the Polish striker who had dispossessed Moore, didn't play in the return leg either. He too was in the twilight of a long and illustrious career. Let's have a listen here to the English commentator as he looks down the Polish team list for the return leg at Wembley, balancing the names he'll have difficulty in pronouncing with those that are slightly easier to wrap his tongue around.
The Polish team, a lot of strange-looking names there, which I'm sure are going to give me some problems from time to time, but at least Lato is an easy name to say, an easy player to watch, number 7. He with number 11, Godoka. The two front runners, the men that our panel have already predicted could give this England side some trouble. Dania, of course, the captain, number 9, a tremendously skillful player. Tomaszewski, The goalkeeper, they say, is 6'4" tall. He's going to be caught with the aerial battle tonight. Their pressure is going to come on him. And Jerzy Gorgon, the big number 3, this man who's something of a walking telegraph pole, 6'2.5" tall. He's the strong man in the middle, in the heart of this Polish defence.
Despite the 2-0 away defeat, it was widely assumed that the wrongs of Poland would become the rights of Wembley, that capitalism, so to speak, would trample all over the planned economy. England, back to their traditional white shirts after their yellow shirts in Poland, started off smartly, favouring crosses from both Poland flanks. Jan Tomaszewski, the Poland goalkeeper, who was dubbed the Clown by manager and part-time TV pundit Brian Clough, seemed to do everything in his power to prove Clough right. In one early example of his flakiness, he nearly threw the ball at Alan Clark's feet before redeeming himself. In another indication that it was going to be an eventful afternoon, Tomaszewski appeared to dislocate a finger before it was painfully pulled back into place. Tomaszewski had a hectic first half, interspersing brilliant saves with less convincing ones, swinging from the sublime to the ridiculous. England did pretty much everything but score. In the first half, they forced 14 corners. There were only 3 teams in England and Poland's qualifying group, the third being Wales. Wales had done England a favour by drawing with Poland in one of their 2 matches, but as a result of their loss in Poland, England still had to win at Wembley. Poland would qualify for the West Germany finals with a draw. As luck would have it at Wembley, Jan Domarski opened the scoring first for Poland. Clark equalised with a second-half penalty, but it wasn't enough. When the Belgian referee blew the final whistle, the score was 1-1 and England had failed to qualify for the finals. The Poland side, full of players with difficult-to-pronounce names, finished third in the 1974 World Cup. After making penalty saves against West Germany and Sweden and being pretty dependable in goals, Tomaszewski was named the tournament's best goalkeeper. The England football historian and journalist Brian Glanville has pointed out that the Poland team in West Germany were not the Poland team of Wembley. The team of West Germany were better drilled and more confident. At the same time, these were heady days for Polish football. With Tomaszewski in the team, Poland won silver in football at the 1976 Montreal Olympics. These might have been heady days for Polish football, but they weren't heady days for Polish footballers. Tomaszewski, for instance, was not allowed to play outside of Poland until after he had turned 30. When he did, he played both in Belgium, as did many of his Polish colleagues, and Spain. He finished off his career as a journalist, goalkeeping coach, and pundit, developing a reputation for saying crazy things that raised people's hackles. He was not fond of those in power, perhaps because his family had felt the jackboot of authority. At the end of the Second World War, his parents were kicked out of Vilnius in Lithuania and told to find a home in Poland. Tomaszewski had that off-the-wall goalkeeper sensibility until the very end. The Wembley draw against Poland was to be Sir Alf Ramsey's last game as England manager, as he went the way of Moore a couple of games later. Leeds United under Don Revie won the 1973-4 league title from Liverpool, so it made sense to make Revie England coach as Ramsey's successor. It was an interesting league season, 1973-74, very much in keeping with the times. The football was not freewheeling. Leeds, the league winners, drew 14 of their 42 league games, exactly a third of their matches. Draws were as common as rainy days and chip butties. Liverpool, in second, played out 13 draws in their 42 fixtures, while Derby County played out 14 like Leeds. Ipswich Town, in fourth, played out 11 draws. The fact that a win was worth only 2 points in those days, combined with a preponderance of draws, means that many clubs found themselves close to each other in the middle of the table. 7 points, for example, separated Derby in third from Wolverhampton Wanderers in 12th, Derby on 48 points and Wolves on 41. You can take this even further. Only 10 points separated Ipswich Town in 4th on 47 points from 19th placed Birmingham City on 37 points. That's 16 clubs on a 10-point split. Such cramming in the middle makes every match a dogfight. If you can't win, you're going to make sure you don't lose. While 1973-4 was a fine season for Reeves Leeds United, it was a less impressive one for Manchester United. An old United stalwart, Denis Law, scored against them for Manchester City in United's last game of the season, a goal which sealed their relegation fate. Out of decency, I'll resist the temptation to draw too many contemporary parallels, but leave you with United's record for the season. United were relegated along with Norwich City and Southampton, finishing 3 points above City's 29 points in second last position. Manchester United lost 20 of their 42 games in the league. They conceded 10 more goals than they scored. A cake is not baked from such crumbs. Forgive me while I interrupt the sports story to tell you about the Luke Alfred Show Patreon. As you may know, being a writer is not the most lucrative career choice. Please consider making a small donation to keep the show going at patreon.com/The Luke Alfred Show. But for now, let's get back to the story. While Manchester United went down, Muhammad Ali merely threatened to go down in 1974, clinging to the ropes in the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman, the champion in Kinshasa, Zaire. The strategy was later referred to as Ali's rope-a-dope trick. As the fight progressed, the powerful Foreman tired himself out as he tried to put the defensively minded Ali down. Ultimately, through frustration and fatigue, Foreman exposed his defenses to the quicksilver counter-punching Ali, who knocked Foreman to the canvas in the 8th round. Foreman might not have lost the fight against Ali early, but he failed to endear himself to the locals from the beginning. He got off the plane upon arrival in Kinshasa with his 2 German shepherds, dogs that reminded ordinary Zairans of the dogs used by the Belgian colonials prior to independence in 1960. Ali, by contrast, was friendly and outgoing, deft with verbal jabs and rhyming combinations. He was the popular favorite, although widely tipped to lose. The Rumble was not only a fight, it was a cultural event, a jamboree, a happening, with singers and bands, including James Brown and Miriam Makeba, performing beforehand, and journalists and writers making beautiful sense of it. After a postponement because Foreman cut his eye in sparring, the fight finally took place at 4 a.m. local time to accommodate viewers in North America, where it was shown on pay-per-view closed-circuit television, otherwise known as theater television. The fight's American audience ran into tens of millions, although its true number is probably exaggerated. An estimated 26 million watched the fight on BBC. These things should always be taken with a healthy pinch of salt, but in some quarters, the Rumble has been dubbed the greatest sporting event of the 20th century. One of the commentators that night was American boxing legend Colonel Bob Sheridan. Here he is, 40 years later, saying some blithely off-color things about Africa in 1974.
It was a different time in history. Going to Africa was like going to the moon in those days. It was the first time that 4 satellites were used. There were only 4 communication satellites at that time that were used simultaneously, and that telecast went to 1 billion people live. It was one of the big promotions with involving Don King's first really big promotion that he was involved with. So it was an extraordinary place to be in, an extraordinary time, and a huge thrill for me to have called that fight. And I had no idea at the time Here we are, 40 years later, and it's still a legendary fight.
Don King, the fight's promoter, was unable to stage the fight in the US, and the money for the purse and the hotel bills and the happy frivolity came from some shady places. The Libyan, Muammar Gaddafi, is reputed to have forked out money for the fight. So too did the then Zairean dictator Mobutu Sese Seko on the advice of his American advisors. By his own admission, Foreman was an angry man in 1974 with only, quote, hate and revenge on my mind. In later years, Foreman's attitude softened. He and Ali became supportive of each other and best of friends. It didn't happen immediately, but Foreman seemed to leave part of himself behind in the Kinshasa ring. It was an exciting year for sport in Zaire under Sese Seko's dictatorship. Only one team from Africa qualified for the World Cup in those years. With Sese Seko's support, the national team beat Zambia and Morocco home and away in the final qualifying stage to book their place in West Germany. Sese Seko, who came to power in a 1965 coup with American and Belgian backing, overthrowing Patrice Lumumba's democratically elected government, is reputed to have given the players a Volkswagen each and lavished gifts such as jewelry upon them for their girlfriends and wives. He invited the players to the presidential palace, an offer they couldn't refuse. They weren't to know it then, but with Sese Seko's involvement and his advisors prying, their World Cup ordeal was only just beginning. Having qualified for the 1974 World Cup in West Germany, Zaire were drawn in an awkward group with Scotland, Brazil, and Yugoslavia. They lost 2-0 to the Scots in their opener, a by no means embarrassing result, despite the Scots manager telling his team beforehand that if they couldn't beat Zaire, they may as well pack up and go home. In the days running up to Zaire's second match against Yugoslavia, the team became embroiled in a payment row over appearance bonuses. It is difficult to say for sure, but the Zaire players were either concerned that travelling officials might be siphoning off what was meant for them, or FIFA money meant for them was heading straight back into Zaire, in which case they would never see it. Either way, fearing an incident, FIFA intervened, offering the team 3,000 Deutschmarks per man in compensation, which smoothed ruffled waters temporarily. Zaire was coached by a Yugoslavian at the time, Blagoje Vedinic, a former goalkeeper, and he was keen to do well against them, particularly as he realized after the team's Scotland loss that this was do or die for them, and they still had Brazil to play. In the event, none of these things really mattered. The team was still disgruntled, a situation compounded by the team going down 1, 2, and 3 early goals against the Yugoslavians. Odd decisions didn't help matters. Kazai Mwamba, their first-choice goalkeeper, was replaced with a far shorter substitute keeper, which did little to alleviate feelings of doom. When the final whistle was blown, Zaire had conceded 9 goals against the Yugoslavs. Back home, Sese Seko was furious. The permutations were such for Brazil that they needed to put at least 3 past Zaire in order to qualify for the second round in both teams' final group game. Zaire were doing well at half-time, only 1-0 down, proving that winning the 1974 Africa Cup of Nations was no fluke. But in the second half, disaster, as Brazil netted a second and a third goal. Raoul Kudumu, Zaire's captain, has subsequently alleged that the Zaire coach and their goalkeeper fixed the match, with the keeper letting in 2 soft goals. The allegation makes sense, but how would we know for sure? Kudumu's thinking gains credence when we think of another incident from the match, one which has entered World Cup folklore. In the second half, the Zaire defender, Mwepu Langa, rushed out of defensive alignment just as Brazil were about to take a free kick, kicking the ball downfield. Fans watching live and fans at home took this for an overzealous moment of innocence from the defender, but this doesn't really make sense, does it? This was an experienced, fated, and well-travelled side. Ilunga was making a point. By kicking the ball away, he claims, he was trying to draw attention to the fact that the match was in the midst of being thrown and was hoping to be red-carded. The well-regarded Romanian referee, Nicolae Ranier, the so-called locomotive of the Carpathians, simply gave the Zaire player a yellow card, and his protest fell on deaf ears. Poor Zaire, unable to score a goal in a tournament they had looked forward to for months, still had to face the intimidating possibility of flying home. Upon touching down in Kinshasa, they were met not by a luxury bus, the mode of transport that had taken them to their waiting plane prior to the World Cup, but a military truck. They were driven immediately to the presidential palace, where they were harangued by Seseseko. How could they let him down like this after all he had done for them? He lectured them for minutes, stressing that they were forbidden to leave the country, like Tomaszewski was forbidden to leave Poland before he had turned 30. If they thought they could further their international careers overseas, they were sorely mistaken. They were obliged to play in the local leagues, where his spies could keep an eye on them, and they earned a pittance. Other than heavyweight fights and peaks behind the Iron Curtain, what else can we say about the world in 1974? Well, the Swedish supergroup ABBA had a worldwide hit with Waterloo. Jet airliners fell from the sky with alarming regularity, sometimes the result of hijacking, a common form of political extremism at the time, sometimes because of mechanical failure. Richard Nixon, the US president, finally capitulated after a long, costly, and unsavory siege, otherwise known as Watergate, and the Rubik's Cube became a hidden feature of classrooms across the world. Roman Polanski wowed global audiences with Chinatown, a film in which Jack Nicholson gave new meaning to the phrase nose job, and the Derg took over from Emperor Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. In European news, Volkswagen brought out a successor to the Beetle, the car Seseseko had given to his players in the hope they would do Zaire proud in West Germany. The car was called the Golf. Who would have thought golf could provide the name for a car? It has proved just as popular, if not more so, than the Beetle. One of my favorite stories from 1974, however, relates to the birth of the Chipko movement in 2 Himalayan villages. Frightened by logging of oak and rhododendron trees around the villages of Reni and Mandal in northern India, a group of women got together to protect their trees, sometimes going so far as to surround them with a kind of human wall. Not only were the trees a vital source of fuel and fiber, but it's widely felt that deforestation had contributed to a changing microclimate and massive erosion in the area. After trees had been felled by commercial loggers, floods and landslides became more common. The Chipko movement, Chipko means to hug in Hindi, aimed to address these environmental issues and also, I'm happy to report, made the world a linguistically richer place by introducing us to the phrase tree hugger, of which the phrase bunny hugger must surely be a derivation. Elsewhere in the sporting world, West Germany beat the Netherlands in the World Cup final. Poland and Brazil put up good showings too. Jimmy Connors beat Ken Rosewall in what looks from a distance like 3 suspiciously straightforward sets to take his first Wimbledon men's title, and South Africa's Gary Player won the US Masters title at the same time as his rugby compatriots back home were being pummeled by Willie John McBride's rampant British Lions. Late in the year, England sent an ageing cricket team to Australia. They suffered with injuries, and Colin Cowdrey, well into his 40s, had to be flown out. Dennis Lilly and Jeff Thompson, the fast bowlers, licked their lips. I've left the best for last. While researching this episode, I watched the full first half of the England versus Poland game at Wembley, the game England needed desperately to win if they were to get to West Germany for the finals. Halfway through the half, something strange happened. An England player was fouled by a Polish defender in the Polish half. Upon hearing the referee's whistle, the Polish defender rose off the turf, turning his back to the referee helpfully so the ref could record his number. Next, he bowed politely, thanking the referee for booking him. I almost couldn't believe my eyes. I was totally amazed. If you enjoyed this episode of The Luke Alfred Show, please give me a 5-star rating. As an independent creator, this podcast is made possible through your support.